Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio.
Briefing will have updates from Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General Mike Farnworth and Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Rob Fleming. A reminder to media on the line, please press *1 to enter the queue. You will be limited to one question and one follow-up. With that, I'll hand it over to Minister Farnworth.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm honored to be here on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples on the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. As you know, rain is once again hitting our province, with more on the way. This will impact already soaked lands and waterways. The next 9 or 10 days could be quite challenging. Environment and Climate Change Canada has warned about a series of storms. We all need to pay close attention to the experts, as the forecasts for these will get more accurate the closer we get to these events. We're a resilient province, that is clear. We're strong, compassionate, and resolute. And above all, we help each other in good times and in bad times. Of course, the size of the current fight we're in together is significant. It's enormous. It involving first responders, volunteers, emergency workers, heavy equipment operators, farmers, work crews, transport drivers, just about everybody, and many more hardworking people going around the clock in all areas of the province. We're not out of the woods yet, but good work is being done on the ground to keep people safe and get communities the supports that they need. Emergency support services are working hard across the province and have registered more than 6,500 evacuees. On top of Emergency Management BC supports, existing student emergency assistance funding and Indigenous emergency assistance funding are available for students at both the Nicola Valley Institute of Technology and the University of the Fraser Valley. This money is to relieve pressure and stress on students. It is not a loan that has to be paid back, and helps students pay for living expenses, travel, and food. I want all students to know that help is there and our government is here for you. We're also working with the First Nations Health Authority and First Nations Emergency Services Society to get culturally safe support where it is needed and required. British Columbians have welcomed nearly 1,400 people into their homes offering billets. Thousands more are in commercial and group lodgings. The Canadian forces are on the ground and in the air. More than 120 troops are working in Abbotsford, with more being positioned as needed. And they're laboring shoulder to shoulder with work crews to repair destroyed infrastructure and help keep us safe from future storms. More than 4 million sandbags are ready to be deployed, with nearly 200,000 deployed so far, 45,000 at the Barrowtown pump alone. Through tireless effort, rail service is gradually being repaired, with CP reporting that shipments will be resuming today and CN working on the same for tomorrow. And I'm so glad to see so many of the people of Merritt start to make their way home in a 3-phased approach, with the first phase seeing 1,500 people returning today. This is encouraging news. As a reminder, when evacuated, please do not attempt to return home unless your local government says that it is safe to. We've been tested by disaster after disaster in recent years. Each time we have risen to the challenge by working together, by helping each other. One way that people can provide help in a very real way is by donating what they can to support flooding relief efforts. Trusted organizations like the United Way, food banks, the Canadian Red Cross, BC liquor stores are all accepting donations. A coalition of BC businesses has already donated about $1 million to the Red Cross's British Columbia Floods and Extreme Weather Appeal Fund. You can join them and many other British Columbians by donating what you can. The province is also stepping up. We are partnering with the Canadian Red Cross to provide financial assistance for thousands of people. Funds will be provided by the Red Cross to people whose primary residences have been placed on evacuation order due to flooding. Eligible households will receive $2,000. To access these funds, evacuated British Columbians need to register with the Red Cross by calling 1-800-863-6582. We will be issuing a release with these details, and details are also available on the Canadian Red Cross website. There are other ways you can help as well. You can help by keeping the roads clear and avoiding unnecessary travel through hard-hit areas, by conserving fuel, carpooling, and taking public transit whenever possible, by checking on a neighbor to see if you can save them a trip to the grocery store. It's also important to follow non-essential travel restrictions. Today, we're issuing an additional order to limit travel on Highway 7 from Merritt to Agassiz. This will have similar restrictions to the previously announced orders for our highways. Minister Fleming will have more information on that in a moment. Day after day, I'm feeling incredibly proud of the generosity and the strength of the people of our province. We know that working together is the only way to get through this disaster. That is the only way forward, no matter what comes our way next. There's a lot of hard work ahead, but I have no doubt that we will rebuild stronger than before. With that, I'll now turn it over to Minister Fleming. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much, Minister Farnworth. Just an update from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. Our focus remains on the reopening of vital trade corridors from the Lower Mainland to the interior and the north. Maintaining supply chains so people can get the products they need has been and continues to be our ministry's top priority. As we continue to work to reopen Highway 1, we need to ensure that the supply chain can move with limited disruption. Whether it's milk trucks, fuel trucks, or food deliveries, these essential goods are struggling right now to get through some of the congestion we're seeing in the Lower Mainland. In response, as Minister Farnworth just mentioned, we are extending the essential travel order along the Highway 7 corridor to include the segment of Highway 7 between Agassiz and Mission. Effective today on Highway 7 between Murray Street Road and Mission to Highway 1 and Hope, it will be restricted to essential travel only. It is imperative that we give priority to our essential supply chain, and this is the way that we can do that. This order is for the short term. It will come into effect at 8 p.m. tonight, allowing those who drove to work today to get home. We've also heard from school districts and others the importance of getting teachers and kids to school, as well as healthcare and other essential workers to their jobs in our healthcare system. So to address that, we're updating the definition of essential travel to include public transit vehicles, charter buses, and school buses to transport these workers and students while the order is in effect. Just by way of an additional update on Highway 1, reopening all of the flooded parts of Highway 1 remains our priority, but a lot of it depends on upcoming weather events. There is no estimated time of opening just now. It's raining again in the Sumas, and we don't know what more precipitation will do to impact Highway 1 further. In general, though, water has receded in eastbound lanes, so those are now exposed. If the weather doesn't affect this development, we should have a better sense as early as the end of day tomorrow about additional reopenings along Highway 1. By way of an update on Highway 3, currently the Highway 7 to Highway 3 corridor is the only route for commercial vehicles because of the significant damage to the Coquihalla and the highway up the Fraser Canyon. Yesterday, Highway 3 was closed briefly at a site near Manning Park that was damaged in last week's storm event. This was a preemptive closure that the ministry undertook, necessary until geotechnical engineers could get on site to do a full assessment. They did that. They acted quickly. They determined the highway could reopen with monitoring in place, and we had traffic moving again within a few hours of that closure. But the decision to close Highway 3, as I said, was about safety. And while we've had people working around the clock to get these routes open, safety is always going to take precedence as we move forward. While we're pleased that the closure on Highway 3 was brief, it's the only east-west commercial highway connection currently. The work we're doing with our partners to reestablish other links in the supply chain is working. CP is still scheduled to be back up and running today, and CN could be back in operation as early as tomorrow. The ability to move essential goods by rail is a major development, not just for BC, but for all of Canada. I mentioned Air Canada, as well as other airlines, are increasing cargo transport to BC from other provinces. Products continue to move through the U.S. border in record amounts in transit from the Lower Mainland to the Okanagan and the interior. Fuel is being barged in from the U.S. As we speak, and the coordination between all levels of government and the private sector to get essential goods moving has been a remarkable achievement that will be ongoing for some time. By way of a highway update on Highway 8, Merritt to Spence's Bridge, BC highways in total were impacted at over 200 sites across the southern interior and the south coast, and some received more damage than others. Highway 8 is among those. This highway is closed approximately 20 kilometers from Merritt through to Spence's Bridge as a result of significant damage from the storm event. 18 segments of that highway sustained substantial damage. 4 bridges are either gone or damaged. Along Petey Creek Road, which is a side road off Highway 8, a temporary bridge has been set up near Canford. This is about 17 kilometers west of Merritt and will provide alternate access for some Indigenous communities and local residents to use and to reconnect to the rest of the province. Permanent repairs to the highway is going to take some time, and the engineering assessments are underway now. Provincial staff will be engaging with local Indigenous leaders as well as impacted residents and communities in the coming days. I want to reinforce Minister Farnworth's message around safety on our roads. Last night, unfortunately, we had brief closures on both Highway 7 and Highway 99, entirely due to preventable accidents. And this is a reminder to everyone. Our crews have made remarkable progress getting highways reopened to restricted travel, but we've all seen the images on the media. Conditions are not normal. These are still active construction sites, and we're asking people to be conscious about that. First rule is ask yourself, do I need to be out there? Don't be out there unless it's absolutely essential. If you are driving, slow down and follow the direction of traffic control personnel and be patient. It will be slow as you make your commute. If you're heading out of the Lower Mainland, be prepared for winter conditions. Before reopening any of our engineers as well, our engineers continue to fly and drive the highway before they give clearance to open it to the public. We'll continue to monitor all highways across the province to ensure that they remain safe. With more storms in the forecast, I want to reassure the public that we are ready. We have extra crews and equipment ready to be mobilized. Our staff and maintenance contractors will be out monitoring conditions, and if necessary for safety reasons, we may have to preemptively close highways. We hope not to, but that will be decided as we monitor weather events that could be pending on our province. In closing, our government was very pleased to hear in the throne speech today from the federal government that it announced it will develop Canada's first ever national adaptation strategy. This is a priority the province of BC shares, and in fact, a priority where work is well underway here in our province. In the immediate term, though, we're making very good progress in getting repairs completed where we can and highways back open. And this is only happening because thousands of people are pulling together and mobilizing together. Companies big and small have reached out asking how they can help. They've made their people and their equipment available. We have about 250 pieces of heavy equipment at work at impacted sites across BC right now. And this is an amazing and humbling development to see the outpouring of goodwill and the willingness to rebuild our province. And to everyone who's been a part of these efforts, on behalf of the province of BC, I want to thank you.
Thank you very much. A reminder to media on the line, please press *1 to enter the queue. You will be limited to 1 question and 1 follow-up. Our first question goes to Richard Zussman, Global News.
Minister Farnworth, considering you opened the briefing today, warning people about what we're going to see over the next 9 to 10 days, would you describe it as the province learning its lesson from what happened last week in terms of trying to better prepare people for the upcoming storm?
I'd say it's the province recognizing that we have been through a significant weather event, and what we're trying to do is to make sure that there is all the information necessary for the communities on the ground with the saturated soils that we have seen, being in close communication with Environment Canada to get a full understanding of the nature of the weather events that we'll be facing, and as the picture becomes clear, we'll be able to provide a more accurate update for the people on the ground.
Do you have a follow-up, Richard?
what is the best way for the people on the ground to understand what may be coming? Do you suggest, a lot of people are going through a lot of things here. They don't always have time to tune into these briefings. Like, how are people expected to get their information as they prepare themselves?
Well, the critical part, obviously, is the advisories that are out there in terms of weather advisories, storm flow advisories that are going to those communities. And what we're concerned about right now is to ensure that the rain that we may be getting and is what is its impact going to be on the crews and the people working in terms of ensuring our dikes are protected. At the same time, local governments then knowing that they are going to be able to respond very quickly and effectively, as will the province if that need arises. What we have seen, for example, in our briefings from Environment Canada, is that there are right now an atmospheric weather event or an atmospheric river that is looking to North Vancouver Island and the Central Coast. And so how that develops and how it moves further south as it weakens is something that we're watching for to get an idea of the kind of rain that we can be expecting, whether that rain will be spread out over a number of days, for example, or whether it is spread out over a shorter time period. All of those things play a different factor into the response that's going to be required.
Next question, Jody Greenwall, Fraser Valley Current.
Hi, yes, I was just hoping to get an update on the pipeline impacts and what repairs are currently underway and what protections there are for pipelines against these types of storms that we saw last week.
TMX is working around the clock with more than 200 people on the ground addressing the situation with the pipeline. They are confident at our latest updates that it will be getting to be able to function on the date that they anticipated. And so one of the things, obviously, is after an event like this, that inspection is crucial. And so at the same time that they're inspecting it, they can also make any improvements that are required in terms of protecting a pipeline.
Jody, do you have a follow-up?
Yes. So with the rail system expected back online, will there be significant backup of rail traffic? Can people see or expect to see more trains moving through their communities?
The word we've had from the railways, and I can tell you that I have spoken with CP Rail, for example, is that once the railways are up operational, they will be operating 24/7.
For our next question, we come to the room. We'll go to Mira Bain, CBC.
Do I need to stand or?
You don't need to stand, but please remove your mask.
Okay, sure. So, Minister, the mayor of Princeton is putting out an impassioned plea for more help for his community. He wants more money, more boots on the ground. What assurance can you give him that help is coming quickly before things start to freeze? Has the province asked the federal government for military help for Princeton?
What I can tell you is that both my ministry have been in regular touch with the community of Princeton, that the Minister of Municipal Affairs has been in touch with the Mayor of Princeton. We were on a call last week. The Mayor of Princeton asked some questions in terms of about getting additional traffic management. That was said would be taking place. I know that there have been requests around disaster financial assistance that he's concerned about. Again, on that, that's already the disaster financial assistance. This is a disaster. It's already been approved. So in terms of the repair of civic infrastructure, the repair of roads and bridges, that cost is going to be covered. And so that is being communicated to the mayor. At the same time, in terms of requests for additional resources, they're obviously being assessed, and what help is needed is being provided. And we've been working very closely with the administration in the city of Princeton to ensure that, just like other communities, they're going to be able to get back on their feet. As we know, over the last couple of days, power or the natural gas supply has been restored to the community of Princeton. There were about, I think, just over 1,200 homes that were without natural gas. I think at the last briefing I said just over almost 1,100, just over 1,100 have been restored.
Mira, do you have a follow-up?
Minister, you encourage British Columbians living close to the U.S. border to go and get gas and groceries if they could. Some followed that advice and some are now upset. They say they've been fined at the border because they didn't have a negative PCR test. Now, has the issue been dealt with?
I initially had contacted the federal government, spoke with Minister Blair, that this was an issue that we needed to deal with, that people were going to be able to go across the border and not have that PCR test. The federal government agreed that was a reasonable thing to do, and we saw that there's clearly a communication issue. The border, as you know, is a federal responsibility. Again, contacted Minister Blair. He told me he was on it. Everything I've heard so far is that they have communicated that down to the CBSA, that that exemption is there for people to go across the border and to get essential services, in particular gas, and that also the message is that any tickets that have been issued will be revoked.
For the next question, we go back to the phone lines. Mike Hager, Globe and Mail, please go ahead.
Thanks for taking questions. Can you just explain how many people could be covered by this, I guess, stipend, and it's fully funded by the Red Cross? How is this grant developed?
It's funded by the Red Cross with funds put in place as well by the province. So that's how it's done. It's similar to the situation that we had during the fires. And so it would be people who have been evacuated, just like during the fire season, and the eligibility requirements and how to do it will be accessed, can be accessed by the online website.
Mike, do you have a follow-up?
Yep. The Highway 8, Minister Fleming, you said was particularly hard hit. Wondering if you could give an update on the Coquihalla and just how many portions are totally obliterated, and whether you think the unique geography of that highway contributed to the destruction there.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll do a substantive Highway 5 update, as I mentioned yesterday, in the coming days. We have a lot of engineers out looking at the infrastructure damage that's been sustained. We're working with our federal partners, road maintenance contractors, geotech staff have been flown into some of the sites. There are about 5 of them that are broken, that have been significantly degraded and damaged. So we'll have more to say once our engineering staff have had a look at what temporary repairs and long-term repair plans look like, and we'll be sharing that with the public.
For the next question, we go to Ben Milger, CTV. Ben, please go ahead.
Thank you. How are potentially saturated and unstable slopes near highways and other key pieces of infrastructure being monitored to predict where landslides may occur during the storms expected over the coming days?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we have contractors or highway maintenance people, RCMP patrol, that are monitoring our highways both from the air and on the ground. This is how we detected the tension cracks that were discovered on Highway 3 yesterday that led to the 3-hour shutdown. And that's what we needed to do, is to get engineers in there to look at that and look at what could be done in terms of a possible reopening. That was the determination that was made. So, we have known slide sites in this province. We have areas that we know where the amount of precipitation that was part of the rain event has accumulated and posed a risk, and where we have cleared away debris. Those are the kinds of areas that staff will be monitoring very closely.
Ben, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I do. In terms of preventing further flooding, what kind of plans are in place to work with Washington state officials to prevent or slow any further movement of water from the Nooksack River into the Sumas Prairie after these expected rain events?
Thank you for that question. So we are in communication with Washington State about events that and situations developing there. At the same time, we've also ensured that there are, as I said in my remarks, sandbags in place in the Matsqui, Abbotsford, Sumas area to be able to deal with situations as they arise. The situation with the Nooksack is a complicated one. It's not one where, in terms of the long term, there is there's not a simple solution. As I said yesterday, I believe it's a problem that is going to have to be addressed by both British Columbia and Washington together on a regional basis, probably requiring the involvement of the our federal government and the U.S. federal government. But in terms of the immediacy of the Nooksack River, what we're hearing right now is that it is down. We are watching it closely, and we are in communications with Washington State.
For our next question, we go to Peter Mitham, Country Life.
Hello, Minister Farnworth. Just wanted to follow up on perhaps some of the questions today and also your answer yesterday that in terms of learning from past events, there may be the possibility of doing some relocation. And I know the writers for our publication have been sort of asking, are there going to be any impacts on farmers if you do consider any relocation or bans on construction in certain areas?
Thanks, and that's a really good question, and I think it speaks to the longer-term approach in terms of disaster and emergency management, not just in the Southwest, but right across the province. And that is why that Sendai framework and the work that we're doing on the overhaul of the Emergency Program Act are so important, so that you're not just dealing with response, but you are dealing with prevention and mitigation, response and recovery. And so obviously, agriculture is a huge component in the Fraser Valley, and I think what I was really referring to are, is it an opportunity in terms of residential areas that may have been impacted, similar to what we saw in Grand Forks, for example. The immediacy thing right now is to get the recovery underway and build back better. So whether it's our dikes, our road networks, our transportation systems, all of those things, at the same time recognizing that there may be areas where you say, you know what, the flooding risk here is so great, particularly in terms of residential. Is there an opportunity to perhaps relocate? I think that's more of a longer-term discussion. The immediacy right now, of course, is to address the situation as it is, and to get things back to normal as quickly as possible.
Peter, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, thanks. And for Minister Fleming, understand from some conversations this morning that Emergency Management BC could be consulted just regarding a lack of a smooth connection to Vancouver Island. Some transportation companies are not committing drivers to routes over to that area, and just was curious if there was anything that could be done to improve flow of traffic to Vancouver Island and supplies to that area.
Yeah, so we have unimpeded supply chains via BC Ferries, by a C-SPAN ferry activity for commercial vehicles. That's functioning on an emergency basis. We had a connection between the South Island when the Malahat Highway 1 was damaged and down and functioning at well below capacity, that connected Swartz Bay with Duke Point Ferry Terminal to distribute goods. We have a commercial truck driving workforce on the island that continues to serve island communities. Companies have been stepping up to make extra deliveries. We've had convoys of fuel trucks that are using the barge and Duke Point Terminal in Nanaimo for additional fuel distribution. So there have been some shortages. Gas stations have run out of fuel and they've been refilled, and that's the pattern that is happening on Vancouver Island. And as I mentioned earlier, on the fuel situation, we have barged fuel coming up from the United States. You had the update on TMX and when Parkland Refinery will be back in production. So we're managing that. The fuel restrictions that are in place in the Lower Mainland are the same that are in place on Vancouver Island, the Gulf Islands, and the Sunshine Coast. And we'll be advising on a daily basis when we think those restrictions might be able to be lifted. The order is until December 1st. It remains until December 1st at this time.
That's all the questions we have for today. That concludes today's event.
Busy. It was a typical Sunday busy. Other gas stations that I passed by just had a few vehicles. There were no signs of lineups or panic buying. So we're confident that the measures that have been put in place are working and that people are doing the right thing.
Richard, do you have a follow-up?
Would the province consider making public transit free during this period of time where rationing is being asked for until December 1st? And also for Minister Fleming, could you give us an update? I know you mentioned some time frames on Highway 1. Can you talk about how quickly we may be able to open that stretch up, leading more towards Chilliwack, or is it too variable now with the weather systems coming later this week?
With regards to transit, I can tell you we're looking at that 9 days for the issue around gas. And what we've seen is people are doing the right thing. People are taking transit. People are monitoring their trips. And we're going to get through this. And we think the measures that we have in place at this time are the appropriate ones that will see us through to the 1st of December.
If you'd like to defer to, Minister Fleming first.
Yes, sorry, I'll just add on to Richard's question about transit. Highway 1, rather. So as I mentioned earlier, the stretch in the most affected area still remains underwater. Some assessments have been done about the condition of the road. Where we've been able to open up Highway 1 again, in Chilliwack and east of Chilliwack to Bridal Falls, we've been pleasantly surprised that the road is in good condition, so it's been able to be reopened. It's in use now. There are no travel restrictions there, but we ask people to travel judiciously, not take unnecessary trips and not contribute to unnecessary congestion there. But it's too early. I will commit to an update as soon as I have one, but it's too early in terms of a timeline on when all of Highway 1 is going to be reopened through the Fraser Valley.
Now, next question, we go to Lisa Eustace, City News.
Good morning, ministers. I'm just wondering, and it's sort of following up on something someone else asked. Last week when we asked about this, it was very clear that the government said that it's local governments that were responsible for communicating, anything to do with weather. But this weekend, it was very noticeable that the province sent out a weather warning with the rains coming, which are far less substantial than what came a week ago. So that seems like a change in tone, and I'm wondering, does this mean that the province has realized that there is a greater role for the province to play in these situations and not just leave it all to local governments and drive BC?
What we're wanting to do, and given the event that we've seen, which, as you know, is absolutely unprecedented, that we've received the flood warnings, we received stream flow warnings, we received weather advisories. They're going out they go up on Drive BC, they go up on the highway signs and such like, and we want to make sure that there is a wide distribution of information for people. It's not about local communities are managing the issues on the ground, and particularly given the fact that right now the latest weather warning is about rain coming through, and the ground is particularly saturated. That makes it a much more challenging situation.
Lisa, do you have a follow-up?
Being that this is the third of the unprecedented events this year, can we expect going forward that this is the kind of response like what we saw this weekend with the weather coming, and with now there are signs on the highway and there were not last weekend, a lot of the digital signs, that we can expect, I guess, a more preemptive response from the province to give a provincial-wide warnings versus just relying on the local governments, that this is a shift in how things will be handled going forward?
I mean, we always want to make sure we have the best information available, and that's why when I said, I was asked earlier about the ranking system for atmospheric rivers, which, as I said, is a term that I think most of us are only just getting to really understand what that means. The fact that Environment Canada is working on a ranking system that will allow us to have a better understanding of exactly what is going to be taking place, I think is extremely important, and will help us improve not just our notification but our response, and help local governments too, which are on the ground at that front line. So all of that is important. It also is one of the reasons, I have also repeatedly said on a number of occasions, why it's so important that the work that we are currently undertaking and have been undertaking around a complete revamp and overhaul of the Emergency Program Act. so that disaster management doesn't just focus on response, but it focuses on prevention, mitigation, response, and recovery, and does so under a comprehensive framework. And that's why I've mentioned the Sendai framework a number of times. So all of those things are important, and that will lead us to be able to deal better with these kinds of events, because, as we know, climate change is here, and I think what we saw over this past weekend is obviously a result of that.
Next question, Colton Davies, Radio NL.
Just wanting to know how long travel restrictions might be remaining in place between the southern interior and the south coast, and if people should be expecting those restrictions to stay in place over the holiday season at this point. And also in that breath, wondering if temporary repairs to either Highway 1 through the Fraser Canyon or the Coquihalla Highway south of Merritt may be ready before, again, the holiday season.
Thank you for the question, Colton. So on Highway 5, we'll have an update about the Coquihalla in the coming days, and it will have a timeline and some background on the engineering assessment and what we propose as a temporary fix versus a long-term rebuild that takes into account the need to make that infrastructure sustainable and resilient. So that will be in the coming days. With regards to Highway 3, let's just deal with that and the restrictions. Those restrictions need to be in place right now. Those restrictions were there to prioritize people that were stranded from their homes to return to their principal residences, and also to get much-needed goods on the move into the southern interior and the north of the province. So we'll have an update daily, but we've always anticipated that those restrictions are in place as they are needed. So they will be lifted when they are no longer needed. But it's too early right now. We've only had that road open on Friday. We're trying to eliminate the bottleneck that has clogged our supply chains when it was unable to be connected, and so that remains the priority at this time.
Colton, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, please. Thank you, and thanks for that answer. Also curious, too, with the non-essential travel restrictions, with the road checks that were in place, how many non-essential travelers were turned around at the road checks on the weekend? And I know Minister Farnworth had mentioned the possibility of fines, and I wouldn't suspect any were issued, but I'm curious if any were.
To my knowledge, British Columbians followed the orders very well. They're putting their fellow British Columbians first. They understand who is a priority and who isn't. And to my knowledge, no fines were issued by the RCMP on Highway 3. And Minister Farnworth may have something to add. Okay, that is the update from how the weekend went. So there was presence there, but there was no need for enforcement.
Next question goes to Kat Slepian, Black Press. Kat, are you there?
Sorry, I just had my mute on. So the federal government said on Sunday that there are about 500 troops in BC, largely in kind of the Fraser Valley area. What particularly are those troops doing in the eastern Fraser Valley? And does the province anticipate needing more military aid in the coming days and weeks?
Yeah, the troops that we received from the Fraser Valley are doing a variety of tasks, some logistical. Obviously, others we've seen them out helping to breach some of the dikes and strengthening those dikes, and also delivering supplies to communities in different parts, in particular on the canyon. So there's a significant amount of work that's being done. And the federal government has been very responsive in that matter, and basically whatever we've asked for, they've been able to supply. And I think things are very much working as they're supposed to right now.
Do you have a follow-up, Kat?
I do. This one's from Minister Potham, I suppose. We know that there were thousands of heads of cattle and other livestock on Sumas Prairie when it flooded, some of which were unfortunately not able to be saved. Are there any sort of plans going forward in terms of removing those remains and any sort of other kind of agricultural or biological, waste on the Sumas Prairie going forward?
Thanks for the question. So I'll just add to one of the jobs that the military is assisting with. They are also moving live chickens from some barns into safer barns, and so we really appreciate the help that they've given us there. We do have a plan around disposal of carcasses, and that's ongoing. We're working closely with the agricultural associations to understand their needs, and we're also working with local government on capacity in landfills and possible incineration areas. And so, yeah, that's underway. We're currently seeing too much water to really address that part right now, but the temperatures are cool, and so we've got a bit of time to try and get that going. But the planning is definitely underway.
Next question, Lisa Cordasco, Vancouver Sun.
Thank you. Minister Farnworth, you talked about the response in aiding First Nations communities, but some First Nations say they received flood warning alerts late or not at all. And the First Nations Emergency Society said there are communications problems with local emergency systems, and they don't feel like they are a full partner with the EMBC. What communications problems have been identified by your emergency response people when it comes to alerts to First Nations?
Whenever there's well, first we want to make sure that First Nations are full partners in terms of emergency management and Emergency BC. It's one of the reasons why, in terms of the new the new Emergency Program Act that will be coming into place, there is significant work underway with First Nations to make sure that they are involved and that they are able that we are able to put in place have legislation that deals with their needs and in accordance with the UNDRIP principles. That being said, when there was in the nature of this particular event that it unfolded, our job was to ensure that notifications to affected communities, once we became aware of the scope of the disaster that unfolded, particularly in the canyon, was as quick as possible. That's why the first priority obviously was rescuing people. It was to also in terms of the response of getting supplies flown in. One of the things we obviously want to do when this event is over is to look at where there were gaps and make sure that we're able to address those gaps.
Lisa, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you. I want to switch the focus a bit to the Wet'suwet'en territory. The situation seems to be escalating. The Haida Nation, for example, is promising to, quote, send people and resources in the coming days. Do you expect that we will